Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Tea and Mystery, Victober edition. I'm drinking from this mug that I got last October. It's a design of Claudia at Spinster's library. She does a whole line of like literary cats, mostly classics, and so mugs, t-shirts, other things. So, if you ever get a chance to check that out, that's pretty cool. And I'm drinking Yorkshire Gold, which is one of my favorite teas because it's just a really good standard daily tea. Great with milk, but mainly because the action of the book that we're talking about today takes place not only, but principally in Yorkshire. Yay. As a matter of fact, just talking about Victober, one of the most present things I found is Yorkshire. Almost every book I've read takes place at least in part in Yorkshire lately. Not just in October, but a lot of mysteries I read earlier this year too that were later. I don't know why people like to put a lot of their action in Yorkshire is a mystery to me. But yeah. So we're talking about the Moonstone, which I finished. Yay! And this is good because, I want to talk about mystery novels all the time, especially detective fiction. And having not read this very important part of the history of mystery novels was a failing, I feel like, on my part, or at least an oversight. So I feel much more accomplished, just like I feel accomplished that I finished Jane Eyre this month. I mean, something, right? But you know what? Tea and Mystery, this whole series that I'm doing, is not necessarily an expert's view on mystery as a genre, although the more I read, the more I will know about it. And I have read a good amount of mystery novels altogether over the years. But so many have read further, studied further, and, could tell you even more. But really, for me, it's my ongoing discovery of this genre that I want to share with you guys. So I hope you enjoy. And you probably noticed that I'm wearing the hat. So this was part of the Victober challenges, which is to wear something Victorian. And I don't have a lot of Victorian things. I have like Victorian-inspired clothes, which I've worn over the month-ish. And this, is just, I don't even know if it wasn't, I don't think, even mentioned in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I think later on, renderings of Sherlock Holmes had him wearing this hat. So that's how it became associated with Sherlock Holmes and hence with Victorian literature at all. So it's a bit of a stretch, but I don't care. I'm having fun with it. But I'm wondering what you think. It's a little bit dorky, which, I don't mind dorky. I thrive on dorky, apparently. But do you think I should wear this every month when I do Tea and Mystery? I mean, not just when I talk about Sherlock Holmes, but like anytime? Or not? Because I'm not wearing a Poirot mustache, that's for sure. Oh well, let's go back to the Moonstone. So, first of all, one thing that sets this book apart from much of the mystery genre that I read anyway, is that it's not a murder mystery. It's not a who killed who, which doesn't mean that there isn't murder. There are people who are killed in this book, and people who die, but we don't need to go too much into that. But that's not the important part of the mystery. Really, it centers around the disappearance of this stone, the Moonstone. So, but it's always, often hailed as the first English detective novel. And basically it is. As such, as what came after it is basically of some kind of pattern from this book in some way or another, or at least inspired in some way. But there are some earlier examples that had aspects of it. For instance, Bleak House had a detective and a little bit of a mystery in it. Other stories had mysteries in it of some kind, or sometimes the word mystery would pop in. Gothic novels, for instance, suspense, penny dreadfuls, etc. And we cannot forget Edgar Allan Poe had a well-known detective. Well, not well-known. He's not that well-known. But, to people who read about the history of mystery, he wrote about a detective who had a sidekick, which kind of felt like Sherlock Holmes and Watson. But I do think that Sherlock and Watson are a bit of an improvement, but doesn't mean that they're bad. If you have a chance, if you're at all into this stuff, do go into Edgar Allan Poe's works. And Dupin, I think his name is Dupin. I can't pronounce French names. Please don't make me pronounce French names. Unless I really have heard it 1,000 times, I really can't. There's also an example of Emile Gaboriau, who wrote police stories, I think in French. There we go. That's enough French for today. Not that I'm against French. I just butcher it. Sorry. And Newgate police stories as well. That was another kind of crime fiction situation that came out when the police force came into existence in in Britain. So yeah, there were forms of things that were kind of like floating around. Now, I don't know how to say this is not this is, pretty much though still the detective story to begin all the detective novels, I should say. But it is different. First of all, it's not cults. That, if you see what it's cults from the beginning, I'm assuming all the editions have this. A romance. Now, there are romantic moments in here, but the word romance has taken on so many different meanings over the centuries, and it's hard to explain what is meant by that, really, but it does appeal, I guess, to the romantic side in so many ways. So, good. I do wonder if Catherine Morland from Northanger Abbey, if she would like this. It's slightly different than what she would like, but you never know. Maybe if she would have lived long enough, she may have matured into slightly different stories. We don't know. What makes it different and not bad, but not necessarily good, is that it is much longer than the average detective novel or cozy mystery or anything that I am accustomed to. Now, it's not as big as some like Dickens books that can get up to like 800-900, I don't know, and even Trollope has some massive ones, not to mention George Eliot. But I tend to find myself reading novels that are considered mysteries that are like 350, maybe 400 pages if it's a slightly longer book, but not usually like approximately, let me see, I think this edition is about 500 pages. Yeah, pretty much about 500 pages, which it felt a little bit long for me because I approached it as a mystery, as a detective novel. I think if I would have more kept to the fact that I'm in October and I'm reading Victorian novels, that I should have really thought of it in that sense. It's a Victorian novel first and foremost. So they usually go on a bit. They may have, maybe by the time Conan Doyle started writing The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, they may have shrunk a little bit. But at this point, I think it was published 1868. Takes place a little bit, like about 20 years earlier, but still. 1868, which was basically the end of Charles Dickens' time period. Goodness sakes. Wilkie Collins was basically, not mentor. Charles Dickens was a mentor of Wilkie Collins, so protege. They spent a lot of time together, so he was influenced. Although they did at the end show a little quote from a letter from Charles Dickens to someone else that was not very nice about the Moonstone. I was like, are you kidding? I think he was jealous because it was popular. It took out, I think it was Great Expectations might have been published at the same time. Was it Great Expectations or Tale of Two Cities? Whichever one. It actually sold more than Dickens' book. So Dickens could be a little bit catty. OMG. Kitty cats. But anyway. So yeah, and it has a lot of the elements of a Victorian novel. So, a lot of colonialist references, both good and bad. Sometimes it's hard from our modern perspective to hear certain things. The word Hindu with 2 O's just feels wrong. But I do get a feeling that sometimes that Wilkie Collins, you feel him sometimes siding with the other side. You know what I mean? Not necessarily with the empire, as it were. But I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. A lot of, the plight of the poor comes up sometimes here and there. And some who have been driven to criminal life as a result. So there's a little bit of a understanding of that class of person, that they're not always to blame. ish, you know. Heiresses are in here. That's always important. You know, wills and stuff. So there's lawyers and doctors and etc. People who are in debt, big time. Drug use, opium features in here a lot. They quote from, was it Confessions? I think it is, of a English opium eater, something like that, by De Quincey, which I have a copy of, and I keep meaning to read. And I think it was published between Jane Austen's life and Queen Victoria's reign, so it doesn't fit into my two challenges, so I'm just gonna have to read it. I have a biography of De Quincey, so I really need to read that. Why I bought a biography of De Quincey when I've not read any of his books is not a mystery. It was cheap. Anyway. Can't resist a bargain. Yorkshire again. Yorkshire. The whole Victorian household, you know. Kind of like, again, like Downton Abbey, because it has the butlers, the servants, the lady, the daughter, you know, the romantic things, the disruptions. There's such a disruption in the missing of the disappearance of the Moonstone that, and this is not my idea, by the way, I read this elsewhere, that apparently it kind of prefigures the whole, or prefigures, symbolizes the upsetting of Victorian values and the system itself, you know, so hey, whatever. I like that kind of thing. So all the disturbance of society as expected, and you can see how they react, so. And, you know, a bit of religious fervor, not so much in the normal sense that I mentioned before, how there's, you know, always some clergy around. Not as much this time as you would think. Very little, but that's kind of the point, because there's one character who is quite an evangelizer, but doesn't understand that there's a time for everything, you know. Maybe she never read Ecclesiastes, but she is constantly, in the portion of the book that she is in, trying to bring her relatives back to God, which, you know, it's totally worthy, and that's a nice, you know, idea. Interesting time period, because of the Victorian time, there was a lot of religious, a lot of change, a lot of different ideas coming forth, but also a lot of swinging to the other way, atheism, you know, theory of evolution. So there was probably a conflict, which was slightly felt in this book, but I think it was more of a kind of a comic relief in her way, because she was so trying to convert her relatives that she wasn't really paying attention to everything that was going on, that she might have done better had she done so, and but it was funny because she was like leaving her tracts and literature everywhere, not in a tactful way, just like everywhere. And okay, I'm giving away way too much of the story, so I'm just saying it was actually a little bit silly, but it was a very important part of the book. So I could see where I didn't feel necessarily that that Wilkie Collins was mocking being religious per se, because just because of the context. It was more of he was mocking this particular woman who did not know how to be balanced. So it was pretty, you know, so it's not like offensive, I don't think, to anybody who is religious at all. You know, just like there's a lot of talk about the Hindu religion, which, you know, could be taken either way. Anyway, so there were characters in this book that were just interesting to me, like just in their different ways. One of the main narrators in the book is Gabriel Betteridge, who is the butler, where the action takes place. He works for Lady Verinder, which kind of sounds, I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but kind of sounded Indian to me. I don't know. But it just kind of did, but it's not supposed to. He is such an interesting character. He is so attached to the book Robinson Crusoe that I almost want to read it, just because of it being mentioned so often. And then Drusilla Clack, who is the aforementioned evangelizer, best name ever. Ezra Jennings, Sergeant Cuff, of course, the main detective in the story. And there's another character who's not here very long, but his name is Gooseberry. Well, that's not his actual name. That's a nickname, which is, if I had the gooseberry tea that I had before, but I finished it, I would have used that because that would have been funny. But I got Yorkshire Gold, which, is wonderful. But what I liked from Gooseberry was a brief preview, kind of the Baker Street Irregulars. Not the fan club, but Sherlock Holmes in his stories used to employ a bunch of boys, kids on the street, kids that just run around, very Dickensian feeling, but he'd give them a little money to spy out for him and get into places that adults couldn't get into, either because of their size or because they'd be recognized. Kids can get anywhere and no one notices them. Now I see where that could have come from, although obviously in other Victorian novels that happened here and there. But anyway, have I said too much already? This is like the whole thing when I'm doing Tea Mystery. I don't want to give away too much. I went into Moonstone knowing so little about it that it was great, and I figured out the whodunit early on in a part of the book that I don't know if Wilkie Collins was giving us an indication of who it might be in that part of the book, but I figured it out. I always kind of doubt myself, but then when it came out, I was like, oh man, I got it, yay! I don't know if it's because I just read a lot of these kind of, detective stories and whatever, and there's certain indications, or if it was just somewhat obvious. I don't know. If you guys have read the Moonstone, please let me know if you at all figured out who it was. Now, who is one question, but how, I did not know, and could not know until the story went on, because there was just no way you could have figured it out unless you're an absolute genius at these things. Unless you were spoiled, but then you really didn't figure it out, did you? I read the introduction to the book after I read it, and I didn't really give everything away, which I was surprised about, because these kind of things usually give away the world before you get to read the book. So I never read the introduction until I've read the book. Usually until I've read other books by the same writer, because they'll be like, when this person dies in this other book, and you're like, I didn't know. No, I didn't read that book. This is an introduction to this book. Thanks a million. But anyway, this is how I react. Maybe not out loud, but in my head. So I obviously haven't said everything that happens or the entire plot of the book because I kind of don't want to. Just know that it centers around this jewel called the Moonstone that is very valuable, that goes walkabout, and the entire story centers around people who were there when it disappeared and what they saw, what they didn't see, who could have done it, where could it be, why, etc. So I don't want to tell you any more without giving anything away. I've already given enough about the characters, but I'm going to say that I did not give this 5 stars just because of the length per mystery novel, which is kind of wrong, like I said, because it is a Victorian novel. But hey, I'm allowed. I gave it 4.5 stars just because. That was like that half star just for length, and that's my thing. I could see how this could be a 5 star for other people. I could also see how it could be a 4 or 3 even for certain people. So, but I do think if you kind of like a mystery novel, but you also like a Victorian novel, you should read this. If you are someone who wants to be fully, educated, well-read in the mystery genre, I would also recommend this. That being said, I was in Barnes & Noble last week. I was in the mystery section. I was in the C and D, E section. That was a scary face I just made there. And I didn't see Wilkie Collins there, but I didn't look. So I don't know if this book is ever shelved in the mystery section. So if you all have been to Barnes & Noble recently or any bookshop and you can remember, please let me know. Otherwise, maybe I'll find another day where I've been, when I'm there. It's not that important, but I think it's usually found in the classics area or fiction, general fiction literature section. And that's okay too. Like I said, it is the important predecessor to a lot of mystery stories. I could see a lot of influence on Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, obviously. I've seen influences on Poirot. Possibly even Miss Marple, but I'm not sure. And Peter Wimsey, I saw a few things, Dorothy Sayers books, and further and further. Sometimes I think some people were influenced by those writers who were influenced by the Moonstone. So it's like in a grandfatherly way, he might be an influence. Have you read this? Let me know what you think. And next month I intend to read a nonfiction book about mystery. So hopefully you'll see me again next month doing a tea and mystery. We shall see. Until then, this is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and mystery-filled day. Goodbye.